genuine. It should be the proper knowledge of the scriptures, not something which he concocted or not some of his speculations. He may be very selfless, he may be very caring, but if he feeds me with something with the wrong food, my spiritual development will not be good. So these two most important conditions for the first period for us to form Shraddha properly. We have to meet with the devotee, we have to develop faith in him, some sort of trust in him, but to develop this proper trust in him, he has, the proper Shraddha in him, he has to have these two qualities. He has to have knowledge of the Vedas, as much as mother has to have breast milk to feed the baby. So this is what will be the nourishment. And he has to be selfless, he has to give this shelter and this emotional protection to the spiritual baby or spiritual child. And the crisis, its importance is not very often being discussed among the devotees. That is the chanting of the holy name and emotions. It even sometimes considered to be a sign of a sahajya when we speak about emotions. But at the same time we know that bhakti means emotions. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur in his Chaitanya Bhagavata gives the beautiful definition of bhakti. What is bhakti? He says bhakti yoga, bhakti yoga, bhakti yoga dhan. Bhakti e Krishna nama smarana kandan. He says bhakti is when you chant one name of Krishna. Not many names, not 16 rounds, not 64 rounds. Just once Krishna. And not even chant, just remember. And just by remembering this one name of Krishna, you start crying. Bhakti e Krishna nama smarana kandan. If by remembering just the name of Krishna you start crying, then you have bhakti. If you don't start crying, then you don't have bhakti. Well, you may have bhakti. Definitely we all have some sort of bhakti, because even the face of Shraddha, it's an atomic particle of bhakti. But so this is what will be the nourishment. And he has to be selfless, he has to give this shelter and this emotional protection to the spiritual baby or spiritual child. And the crisis which we have, this is very interesting. We come to a spiritual movement, we see somebody, we get attracted to somebody, we see somebody who is, who poses himself as a sadhu. We don't have any discrimination, any power of discrimination, really, but we initially feel this initial attraction to the whole process, to the chanting, to the purity of people, to the, generally to people who are there. And the first crisis which we have at this stage, I call the crisis of trust, because like little baby sometimes may feel rejected by the parents, may feel, or if the parents are harsh to him, he will develop mistrust to them. So there will be a crisis initially between acceptance and kind of rejection of sadhu. Satsvarup Maharaj beautifully describes how it was with, in his case with Srila Prabhupada when he first met Srila Prabhupada, and he had double mind. He wanted to accept him, he was attracted to him, but he was not at the same time sure. Certain level of mistrust was there, so he was going back and forth, and then Prabhupada gave him some grapes. And initially, Satsvarup Maharaj was a little disappointed because he brought a big stack of transcribed dictations of Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada gave him a few grapes in exchange. And he thought, what's going on? I worked hard and I brought it to him. But then, Prabhupada said something. I don't remember exactly this. It's a beautiful story. Satsvarup Maharaj describes it beautifully. But Prabhupada said that something which actually indicated that, it's just a little indication of my love. I will love you anyway, whether you will do it or not, whether you will come to me or not. From my point of view, the relationship already established, and it's totally unconditional. So the moment when Satsvarup Maharaj felt this unconditional love from Srila Prabhupada, his faith was formed, and his crisis, the crisis of trust, was over. Because before that he was not really sure what's going on, whether he should take this or not, whether it's the good thing to believe in or not, whether it's good thing to invest your heart, because literally Shraddha means investing our hearts into something. So to overcome this crisis of trust, we need to meet with somebody who really shows that he's unconditional, that he loves us unconditionally, and he's ready to take care of us unconditionally. And of course he has to show certain level of genuineness in regard to the knowledge which he gives also, and genuineness of his practices and this and that. So that's the first crisis. Prabhupada also very interestingly, he describes his crisis in this regard. He said, I could not understand Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, but I liked him. He says, I was not convinced at all, but I liked him, and I continued listening to him. And he also says, I noticed that he noticed me, and by by this indication that he is ready to give me shelter, he also developed faith in what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada is saying. In the beginning, we cannot expect that devotees or people will understand what we're saying. It's all the only thing which we can expect from them is they should feel that we're something genuine and that we are really taking care of them. So that's the first crisis, the crisis of trust. But then, what is sadhu sangha? The next level of spiritual development, sadhu sangha. Srila Prabhupada says that sadhu sangha, what is the difference between Shraddha and sadhu sangha? Between Shraddha, when you meet with the devotees, and sadhu sangha. It both seems to be the same. What is the difference? No, Prabhupada very clearly explains what sadhu sangha means, and this is also explained by other acharyas, by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in particular. Sadhu sangha means that you initially get Shraddha, you like people, you respect what they're doing, but at one point you start looking at them as your gurus. This is when you come from the stage of Shraddha to the stage of sadhu sangha. Sadhu sangha, it's not just, I'm coming for last 20 years to the Sunday feast program and, I have sadhu sangha. No. As long as you don't view a particular devotee as your guru, or at least as long as you don't understand that some of these people whom you like and respect eventually should become your gurus, which is very difficult step to do, step forward. You're not in the level of sadhu sangha. Sadhu sangha is when you accept somebody as a spiritual master. But on this stage, to come from Shraddha to sadhu sangha, actually we have this independent nature. And this, what I call, this crisis is the crisis of independence, when we want to protect our independence. We like the society of devotees. We want to be a part of the society of Vaishnavas. But in the beginning, we are very, sensitive, and we don't like if somebody tells us, you should do this, you should do that. Because we accept it, or we consider it as an intrusion into our independence, into the borders which we have. And it's actually, we are more or less freelancers on this stage. So coming from Shraddha to the level of sadhu sangha means to accept certain responsibility or certain obligation. And it basically means that, now I see there is somebody and I will accept what he says. And the most beautiful way of explaining this crisis or formulating this crisis is done by Sanjay in Bhagavad Gita. Because in Bhagavad Gita, Sanjay explains what happens with Arjuna when he initially surrenders. He sees Krishna as his spiritual master. This is the Sandhi. We know that there is this verse which is explained, the Baba Sandhi, when he stops the talk of just a friend and he accepts Krishna as a spiritual master and he says, Shishyastiham sadimam tvam prapanam, I'm surrendered, I'm the soul surrendered unto you, I'm your disciple. But in the next verse he says, Nayotsya iti Govinda, I'm not going to fight, my dear Arjuna. So, my dear Krishna. So that's what it is, that's the crisis. I want to surrender, but I don't want to surrender. I'm surrendered soul, but I'm not going to fight. Don't ask me to fight. So that's the crisis. Before that, it was the crisis, Arjuna had severe identity crisis. His ego was demolished. Now he is coming to the spiritual path. And the first thing which he experienced in the spiritual path is again the crisis, because he does not want to lose his independence. He's not really prepared to lose his independence. Coming a little back to the first crisis, there is one interesting thing which I forget to tell you. Very interesting idea. It may not be so prominent in the Western world, but it's very prominent in Russia and in this Slavic world. But I think it's also, to a certain extent, there for Western-minded people, for people with Western mentality. It is a known psychological fact that babies, they consider their parents as mystical figures. For a little baby, his parent is almighty, because he's so big and he's so powerful and he's this and that. So there is a certain element of mythology or mystification, for a little baby, the parent is a mystical figure. He can do miracles. So in the same way, oftentimes, for a beginning devotees to develop faith in some sadhu, he needs to show some miracles. To strengthen the faith of a devotee, he needs to show some miraculous display of, and if he doesn't show these miracles, then he starts imagining all these miracles. Or he just, he read my thoughts, or he's just, he's such a miracle man. Very often, when you speak with the beginner devotees, when they speak about the spiritual masters, they started exaggerating and saying he's such a mystic. He has to be a mystic, because otherwise I cannot believe in him. Because I don't have proper foundation, proper discrimination. I don't know how to believe in him, what to trust, what not to trust. Therefore, I tend to mystify the figure of a spiritual master or of a sadhu. And actually, the failure of this crisis is that when we imagine something, we mystify the figure of a spiritual master, and then, we devalue. In the beginning, we idealize sadhu, and then we devalue sadhus. This is what happens oftentimes. People come and they idealize sadhus, they idealize devotees. They think they should be totally, completely ideal. And then, they meet something different and they didn't develop proper faith, because the proper faith is the faith in Shastra. The proper sadhu has to take his responsibility, or see his responsibility to develop faith of a devotee proper way in Shastra. There's a beautiful story. I think Pushta Krishna Prabhu tells this story about Prabhupada. He says, Prabhupada, I trust only you. I don't trust anyone else. Only you, a pure devotee, you saved me, you this, you that. And Prabhupada, he looks and smiles and he says, don't trust me. I may fail you. I may let you down. Trust in Krishna. So this is what is very important on this level of spiritual development, to help the devotee to place his heart in the proper way, in the proper place. So that means placing the heart in the proper place. So as soon as possible. Initially, you cannot expect it from the devotee, but it's very important. And that's exactly what Prabhupada was doing. He was instilling faith in Shastra, in his followers. He was not creating the personality cult out of himself like some other sadhus. He was always saying Shastra, 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 Shastra. This is how he was developing the faith. And therefore, this second crisis, when devotees had to develop faith in a particular sadhu as a guru, was very smooth at that time. It was very natural. Devotees, really, it was easily for them, because of so much trust in Prabhupada, they can easily relinquish their independence. So when you go from Shraddha to Sadhu Sangha, it symbolically means that you take Pranam mantra, because you already have Shraddha and you already decided that this particular sadhu will be your guru, will be your guide.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Покупайте на
Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hey Havadbir Avapyate. Hey to transcendental literature more and more. You'll hear that come up quite a bit. So there's chanting the holy names, and there's also literary kirtan. That is, the kirtan, the sound vibration is written down. And when it goes out into society, these books go from one hand to the next. They end up in the most amazing places. And when people open them, what do you think will happen if I open this? Do you dare me to open it? Just pretend like it's the first time I ever got a book and I'm about to open the book. What do you think is going to happen? All right, let's say one of you just you took the impetus to take one of these books out and distribute it when you were going to the store, for instance, and I'm the storekeeper. I picked it up and say, all right, let's see what they gave me. What do you think will happen when I open it? Seeds will pop out. Let me just try it. I'll just open it randomly and see what I read and see what somebody's going to look at for the first time. Are you ready?
Yes.
Whew, this is scary. Okay. If one wants to engage in yoga at home, then he has to make certain that his other engagements are moderate. He cannot spend he cannot spend long hours of the day working hard simply to earn a livelihood. One should work very moderately, eat very moderately, gratify the senses very moderately, and keep his life as free from anxiety as possible. In this way, the practice of yoga may be successful. That's some useful information. This is useful. CNN is not useful, guarantee you. It's not. It's not helpful. But this is helpful. These are seeds that actually can help somebody become free from anxiety. Now, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught, do your own bhajan at home. You have to chant. That's one thing you have to do.